Okay, and we are online.
Hello, welcome to Philosophising. My name is Ruby,
And I'm
and
Nathan.
that's we're gonna talk about music and the brain today.
hmm Yeah. Hang on, let me just check that the stream is all working. But yeah, so if you want while I'm doing that, if you want to introduce it.
Yeah. So last week, or was it last week? Actually, a couple
Mhm.
weeks ago, we talked about synesthesia and how um there's a population of people who like perceive senses in like a mixed way. They would include different sensory perceptions in along with their primary sensory input. And one of the measures of um, true synesthesia is repeatability and like consistency over time. So basically, if we gave you a bunch of letters and numbers, and let's say they were like letter, number, or synesthetes. This week, they say that the letter A is red. 5 weeks from now, the letter A is also still red. 10 weeks from then, so it's very consistent
Mhm.
across time. And we wanted to talk about, or like we wanted to see examples of that kind of consistency. And Nate and I were talking about this, and I was like, you know who has this? Musicians who have perfect pitch. Musicians of perfect pitch like hear a note and they're like, that's an A. That is definitely A. That's always an A. They hear a toilet flush, they'll say E flat. It's always an E flat. Like
Yeah.
it's a very consistent thing. And we
This
were like,
just
oh,
like this just like actually, so this just made me think about something, which is like, why do you think it's so rare for people to have perfect pitch? Because like when you think about it in that context, like it's not that odd for people to have like perfect color perception. Like pretty much everyone, like you look at the background and you're like, okay, there's two types of purple here. And you would do that like very consistently. Or like everyone would be like, that's an M, or like
I
face recognition. Everyone would be like, that's Ruby. Like it seems like that is kind of the default for most of our
I
perception.
no, so I think that I think that's untrue. I think we just don't test people on their color that often. Like how often are we showing people like different colors of matte yellow and being like, are these the same yellows or not the same yellows? Like I think the only time you would even know that someone perceived it differently was like if you were both at like the Home Depot and we're like standing in front of the swaths of paint and it was like, I like this color more than the other.
Yeah. I mean,
um
I don't know. I think we do that quite a lot though. Like if you like,
Hello,
hello, hi
everybody. Welcome
everybody.
back. Yes, the white and gold and blue and black. The dress. that that
I mean,
horrible
I feel
dress.
like we do that quite a lot though. It's like you buy something online and it says like you say like, oh, you like people shop online and you'll be like, oh, like navy blue trousers, and like they show up and they are navy blue. And so for that to happen, everyone had to have a consistent perception of navy blue.
But when it
Like,
comes, but
or I guess I'll
colors,
say
yeah,
like,
yeah. I was gonna say colors, kind of like pitches. They don't have as many words for them unless you're an artist. Like we're like yellow is yellow. Like we're not gonna be like poop yellow, like this yellow, that yellow. They're they're off by that much. And when it comes to music, being because at least in Western music, we have defined these full steps as
uh-huh.
like that's this note, that's this note. You have the language to say that is, like this yellow. Like if we had, learned to perceive color and talk about color in number of yellow pixel, red pixel, like magenta pixel, yellow pixels, and cyan pixel. Do you know what I mean? Like if we had learned that number to like look at a color and be like, that's 32% cyan, 22%.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? Like how we create colors on a screen. Should we have done that, I think we would also find there are some people who are the equivalent of perfect pitch, but color, like
Yeah.
perfect color. Like they could look at a color and then they can call it and be like, that's 30, that's this many RGB. Do you know what I mean? They could like call the
So
RGB values.
do you think it's like that like that so like these differences in pitch are just like smaller differences that are inherently harder to detect then? Or
Yeah, I think most people can detect the general area. Like, we're not bad at being like that note is higher than that note. Like relative
Uh-huh.
pitch, I think
Yeah.
I learned to do that when I was studying
Hmm.
music, right? Like it's kind of a thing you need to learn. It's like, oh, I hit the wrong note. Like, was I off by like one key, or was I off by a whole step? Like you kind of
Yeah.
learn it, and you learn to do it when you're learning to play instruments that require tuning. You're like, oh, like
Hmm.
I'm a little flat or I'm a little
Hmm.
sharp, and like change your embouchure to match it. You have to learn that, but I don't think you're born with it. Like I think you're
Yeah.
taught to like pick this pitch and do the thing. But okay, so because of this, then I went I like dug up this paper I read like a long time
Hmm.
ago, and I was like, okay, let's is there like a biological representation of like your ability to perceive different like types of pitches and sounds. And so
Hmm.
this paper came out in 2005, 2006, and it's called Structural Function and Perceptual Differences in Heschel's Gyrus and Musical Instrument Preference. And this drew me because I was sat there and I was like, is my brain different
Hmm.
than a non-musician? And is my brain different than someone that plays? So I played the clarinet. Is my brain different than someone that plays the flute or someone that plays the cello or like a different instrument? And this paper says yes. And
Hmm.
it's kind of
Hmm.
cool. So we have to go a little bit into like how sounds work. Like hopefully I can explain this well. So you guys can argue with me if I'm doing it in a like poor way. So basically you have like a fundamental pitch. So wait, hold on. Let me find this paper so I'm not like making things up. Here we go. So there's fundamental pitch listeners, which are people who okay, so like in a sound, like let's say you like took a string and you vibrated it. So this is kind of like a string on a violin, and you have the fundamental pitch, which is the actual sound that comes out. Then you have harmonics, which is like, when like the string wave doubles and
Hmm.
quadruples, like each combos of those. And so when we perceive the sound of like a string, you hear the fundamental pitch, which is the pitch, the length of string that was being heard, but you also hear all the harmonics of it at the same time, right? So like you perceive
Hmm.
that string, all the different combinations of it. So people who are musicians that tend to be more fundamental pitch listeners, they tend to play certain instruments, and then there are people who are also harmonic listeners, and so those are spectral pitch listeners, and those are people who
Hmm.
tend to prefer the combination, like they're tuned to the spectrum. So they're listening to the second harmonic, third harmonic. They listen to all the harmonic sounds more, and like you put them in an MRI and you play them the same violin notes. One will light up like if you clean off all the notes and just play the pure tone versus if you played the pure tone plus all the harmonics. Like they will perceive the harmonics differently. And because of this, certain instruments that create more harmonics, so for example, a cello would create more harmonics than a violin would.
Hmm.
People tend to sort themselves like that. So people who play cello tend to have more preference for the spectral to more often are
Oh
spectral
wow. Uh-huh.
listeners, and people who are like flautists and violin players tend to be more fundamental pitch listeners, which is kind of cool. And they
Hmm.
like surveyed and psychometric tested like a lot of orchestras. Like I think they went 500 something orchestra or like people in orchestras, and they did stuck them all in the fMRIs, like recorded, like look at the size of this gyrus, and then they sorted them by like spectral listeners or if they were fundamental pitch listeners. In this part of their brain you can tell, and then they asked them what instrument they played, and it almost mapped out really nicely. So can I share my screen?
Sure. Let me just.
Share
Um, oh yeah.
share
Do I
window.
have to
No, I think I got it. Okay, can you see
add to the
this? Can you
scene?
see the
Got it.
screen?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yep.
so this is from the paper. This is like figure 3 from the paper. So this is after they sorted it out. And so if those of you who are not familiar with an orchestra, so this is where the conductor stands, and then usually the first violins are out here, second violins over here, then the violas, and then the cellos over here. and then like the flutes, oboes, bassoons, clarinets, and then the brass section back here. And then over here are like singers, choir, and then over here is percussion. So this is like a general map layout of how like an orchestra could look. You typically is kind of this order.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like the schematic of an orchestra. Yeah.
correct. And then notice this dotted line. This dotted
Mhm.
line here separates the pitch, the higher pitch. It separates the spectral listeners from the fundamental
The
listeners.
fundamental listeners.
Yeah. And so I think
Yeah.
the fundamental listeners are this side on the left side, which would include some flutes, these piano players, these violin players, and the conductor. And on the other side is the spectral listeners, which is like all of the lower kind of lower instruments and
And so
like
the lower
double bass.
instrument players tend to be so it's like those instruments produce more harmonics just because their fundamental frequency is lower. So like
Correct.
there's more harmonics in the audible
Yeah.
range.
Yeah, because it's lower, the strings are longer. There's just more possible harmonics, and so these people prefer to listen to that. And not only, like, are they like sorted this way? Like this can be sorted just by looking at their brains. It's hard to sort by people who are not musicians, but like if you just looked at the musician brain, they didn't tell you what instrument they played, put them in this like
Wow.
machine, like, and then like played music at them, you could separate out which one like is a low instrument player or a high instrument player, and like kind of guesstimate what instruments they played and how they would sit in an orchestra by how their brain like presented.
And so
Isn't
like
that cool?
what are the features that in the brain that differentiate that?
That is a great question. Let's look. Let's see. This is index of perceptual preference. Okay, so this is just a graph showing like their preference. So fundamental pitch players tend to be piano, percussion, trumpets, guitar, a little bit flute. And then on the other side is more the spectral players. I think there's just a lot more spectral people.
And when it's saying preference, so is this just like how much you like listening to these different instruments?
Yeah, like they prefer it. Like when you stick them in a scanner and you play them sounds from these instruments, they're like, yeah, we prefer that.
So it's just like it's more pleasant for them to listen to.
It's more pleasant, and it's more pleasant to them, and I think there's more activity in those areas. Let's see, correlation of preference versus asymmetry. Yeah, okay, so they're looking at structural asymmetry. And functional asymmetry of the neural substrate of the lateral Heschel's gyrus. The correlation is strong for both non-musicians and musicians. I think it's just like the line and where they sit on the line. So like they've like split up fundamental pitch listeners and spectral listeners. I think spectrals are in white or open shapes, and closed shapes are the fundamental listeners, and the non-musicians are in X's. So the non-musicians are just spread out equally across the board. It's specifically when you look at different types of musicians. Like that's kind of cool. Wait, let me see.
And so this is like so what's on the axes is some asymmetry between like some two different brain regions, or
yeah, I think it's lateralization of the sounds. So I think they're putting they're in an fMRI, right? So they're hearing they're hearing different kinds of instruments, and they're playing sounds and different kinds of tones, and then they're looking at the asymmetry between the left and the right side. I think that's how they're
makes sense. Yeah.
They're defining as like a functional difference between functional pitch. Yep. Both larger gray. Oh yeah, so larger gray volume measured using a MRI, and enhanced P50M activity measured using magnetocephalography in the left gyrus. Yep. It's kind of cool that people pick instruments. Like I don't know when you picked an instrument, but you kind of usually pick it in like the second grade. And then like you kind of stick with it, or you just stop playing. But like in the second grade, you pick it, and you're kind of stuck with that instrument unless you like switch, like unless you switch later on. But like what these are all like professional musicians, obviously. So like they self-sorted by their
Mhm.
preferences to sounds.
Yeah. Which like
Um
I guess makes sense when you think about it. So it's like, okay, these are like just like people who prefer this kind of sound, prefer the instruments that make that sound.
yeah, that make more of that sound, like sounds that have more harmonics to it, which is kind of cool. Um yeah.
I guess like I think it's like it's interesting to me that this is related um to this asymmetry in the Heschel gyrus. Like I'm curious like why that would create this preference for harmonics versus fundamentals.
Oh, or like if it's just, I think it's just innate, and there's just a spread in the natural world. So the thing that I could not find, which I thought would be really cool, I was looking for it, but I couldn't find. But it would be interesting to see within this population. You saw there's a lot more spectral listeners and fewer of the fundamental preference people. I wonder if that the smaller group of fundamental preference people have a higher proportion of the synesthetic, not synesthete, sorry, pitch perfect people, like the people that could like pick out a sound and be like, that's
Because
an
that's
F
all
sharp.
about identifying the
Correct.
fundamental
It's all
frequency.
about the
So
fundamental frequency.
uh-huh.
They're really like tuned in on that. Like they're like, we want that in tune. Like lock it in.
I guess
Um,
okay, this is like a random question, but like if you have like a synthesizer, I guess so like if you had a synthesizer that produced like square waves, so it has like a ton of harmonics, like a person with perfect pitch would just be picking up like the frequency of the biggest square wave or
that is a good question. I don't know. I don't know
Mhm,
what they would pick up. Hmm.
mhm.
There are oh shoot, I forgot. There's this cool experiment, like it was like a stimulus make. Okay, I was like on CyclePy, and I was playing with like audio stimulus that you could make. So you can like
Uh-huh.
put different kinds of waves, and if you like layer them just so, every so often you would get like they would there certain waves would like counteract each other and then
Right.
like
Yeah, you
create,
get interference
yeah, you
between
get
them.
interference, and then you suddenly get like a you get like a rhythmic thing going on, which is kind of um like I wonder if they could pick out. I don't know if they could pick out the pitch. Like it
Yeah.
could,
So that's a beat frequency, right? Like
yeah.
that so that's like so yeah, so the question would be like, okay, does are they perceiving like as a person with perfect pitch perceiving the beat frequency as
No, but that beat has like a pitch to it too. It's not like there's a note, like
yeah.
an actual note comes out. It's not just like a boom. I mean, every boom has like an,
Yeah, yeah.
like
But it
those
is
waves
it
have an
is
actual pitch to it.
but I feel like at like the low levels of perception, it's a little bit different too, because it's like it's not like a square wave or it's not like a sine wave whose amplitude is being modulated. It's kind of you're modulating a carrier sine wave at a certain frequency.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I'm thinking like, okay, like I'm sorry, I'm trying to avoid this glare. Um, I'm thinking like probably at the very early levels of perception, that's going to be represented really differently. Like it's not so like normal sounds that we have kind of like these waves enter the ear and the ear actually kind of mechanically does a Fourier transform on it. And that's like these beat frequencies aren't going to be represented like that.
Yeah. Like I do think sometimes, yeah, maybe that's it. Like spectral listeners are just automatically putting Fourier transforms onto like the way we perceive the world, so that we can perceive, like I feel like it requires mental energy. Like have you heard someone do like throat singing where they're singing like two notes at the time, there's like an overtone? I feel like
Yeah.
if I was not paying attention, I could miss the overtones. But like if they you've told me like, hey, concentrate on the overtones, you can actually pick out the pitches of the oud, and they'll be like singing a completely different melody on top of this note they're holding, and you can miss it. And so in my mind, that requires computation, right? Like you're doing
Yeah.
something more complex on
Although I'll
top of
also
just
say,
hearing.
like, I feel like for speech, like I think in many ways our default for like kind of recognizing sounds is spectral listening, because like the way we decode speech is very spectral. It's like the fundamental frequency of people's speech kind of varies by person, and what makes it intelligible is kind of that you have these specific patterns of formants and like harmonics and stuff, and like different syllables have different patterns with a whole bunch of different frequencies mixed together. So I feel like that's kind of more a default, actually,
That's
because
true.
like
We don't normally sing at each other.
yeah. I mean, really, when you think about it, I think so. When we were talking about the sine waves, I was going to bring this up too. I think it's interesting, like, so like psychophysicists really like to use sine waves for everything. So like I was gonna say, like, we almost like that square wave question, we almost never do anything with square waves because people who study perception just really don't like them. But like in natural settings, like it's very rare to see something that is just a perfect sinusoidal signal.
Ribeye says that it's something they program into cochlear implants.
Oh yeah, what is?
I think she's talking about like the like interpretation of the harmonics. Like they'll activate the same like electrical, I guess like leads. Is that what you mean? I that is interesting actually. Oh, that would sound really terrible though. So like because we can perceive the difference between like the fundamental encoding the
Oh, I
wave
see. Encoding the
envelope
wave
versus
onto
the
the
spectra.
spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully, like at like a lower amplitude.
Yeah.
Because imagine if you're hearing it all at the same time, like you would sound like a robot. It would sound like if you like, okay, took like sound, like my voice singing a note, and then you picked out the fundamental, and then like each harmonic, and then you played because like usually one is a lot louder than the other. The other harmonics are a lot lower in amplitude. But imagine if you played them all at the same volume, like same
Oh yeah.
amplitude, it
Yeah.
would just sound horrible.
I think it just wouldn't sound like anything. Like,
Oh, but
right?
like I mean, for a cochlear implant, that makes sense, right? You would just push it all, and they'll make sense of this. Ribeye says it does. It sounds terrible. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't have thought about like. I mean, I guess people who are making cochlear implants think about this a lot, right? Like they have to
Yeah,
be. They're optimized for understanding language.
right. And
Probably
it's
listening to
like
music sounds really horrible to them. It probably doesn't sound like
probably,
anything
yeah.
interesting or good.
I mean, and I will say, like, there's a lot of stuff about, like, so in our ears, kind of the cochlea actually kind of does both. So, like, at lower frequencies, there's cells that are actually, like, literally kind of tracking at lower frequency sounds. They're actually tracking the phase of the sound waves. But then also the cochlea, because of how it's kind of shaped, so it's this long curled thing, and basically as you go from one end to the other, the resonant frequency changes. So it's this interesting mix. So we're getting, especially at the lower frequencies, it's just kind of like cells fire at the peak of the wave and then they stop firing at the other peak. But then also there's information that's basically being encoded by this like mechanical Fourier transform. And it's just like how much the cells on the different lengths of it are firing tell you about the frequency composition of the sound.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Did you prepare rhythm stuff? Like I that was like my pitch thing.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, so I was reading, actually, this is like less about like how we perceive sound and more about, or how we perceive music and more about kind of like what it does in the brain. So I was reading this really interesting paper. This actually came out of a lab from someone that I know. Now I'll go ahead and share this.
Rapid modulation
Yeah.
in music supports attention in listeners with attentional difficulties.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this one. So this is from Psyche Louis' lab at Northeastern. And essentially what they were doing, so they studied music neuroscience, and what they were doing was they did this study where essentially they took music and they kind of amplitude modulated it at about 5 hertz, I believe. And what they found, so these are the kind of conditions they had. So they had pink noise, they had normal music, and then they had music with this kind of extra modulation imposed on it, which is why this is the waveform and it looks kind of spiky because they are modulating the amplitude at about 5 hertz.
Wait, so music that goes from like really loud to really soft rapidly, like that's what is
Yep.
necessary. So like bah, bah,
Yeah,
but
and
really
I
rapidly.
think one of
Okay.
the interesting things is like really kind of all music does this to some extent. So like when we think about like beat in music, it is like it's basically the amplitude of this sound wave is changing in a predictable rhythmic way. And so basically this was kind of an artificial manipulation they did, but it is also somewhat similar to what is just going on to when you listen to music normally too. Um,
Oh, and they made them do a go no go task.
yeah, so it's specifically a version of it that is called the SART, or the sustained attention to the response task, which is used to measure like your ability to maintain attention over a really long period of time.
Mhm.
And we can just go to, let's see. And so I think this is interesting. So first of all, they did this in a scanner, and what they found is that they seem to just generally, so listening to this amplitude modulated music, first of all, it seemed to generally just increase like brain activity or excitability over a whole bunch of different regions in the cortex. And then what they found was
Wait,
also,
was there less activity in the pink noise? So pink noise is the condition with the high amplitude changing, right?
um, yeah, so pick noise is high amplitude changing, but not at a rhythm. So kind of, so
Got it.
the AM plus music, they're modulating music at a consistent rhythm. And this pink noise, there's no music, and it's just kind of a pretty much a random signal.
Got it. Okay, so the AM music is actually that's the
Is
one
the
that's the study.
experimental manipulation.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Um,
Oh yeah, it does seem to have the most activity with the AM
yeah.
music.
And it's interesting. So it's like this in this control music, you have kind of this like like you get some activation of some overlapping regions, but maybe not quite as much. And then you have also some deactivation of like the frontal eye field area. So kind of some of the areas involved in like motor control.
Yeah. I think actually the other control is actually quite fascinating. The pink
The pink
noise
noise.
control. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
like it's super it's super different. Like
Yeah.
the control music and
Mhm.
the the AM music, like if you like squint it, they look very similar. But like the control is quite it's very different. Like the activity during I guess this is what it looks when like you walk into a bar that's really noisy. Your brain just
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
the SNR gets better.
I think one thing that's going on here is that in this pink noise condition, so the pink noise is very monotonous. So I would
Mm,
bet there's more habituation happening to it, and that's probably why there's less brain response.
yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I remember from the cochleogram earlier. It's just yellow across the board.
This one up here.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
This like pink noise in the far right. It's just like across the
Right. Yeah. Yep.
yellow. Fascinating. Okay, cool. Sorry, continue.
Anyway, yeah. So I think the most interesting thing about this, let me see if I can go to the results here. So they did a whole bunch of stuff. They did MRI and EEG actually, I think at the same time. So they were able to look at the neurological effects of it. let's see. But then they also found, oh yeah, so experiment 4 revealed that the effects of the music depended on an individual's level of attentional deficit as measured by self-report on the ASRS. So this is like a measurement of attentional kind of ADHD type difficulties in adults.
Wait, so they had to tell you how they felt during that exam?
So it's more that like, so the ASRS is more like rating your attentional problems in daily life.
Oh, okay. So they're just self-reporting their daily life amount of attention
Yeah.
problems.
So it's kind of a trait,
Got
kind
it.
of a trait measure versus a state measure.
Okay, and then they split the group up in that way. Like
Right, exactly. Yeah.
okay, so like humans who have high ASRS and low ASRS, and then
Mhm.
and then we just analyzed changes in their, I guess, ability to do this task, this go no go task.
Yeah. And so what they're measuring here is the D prime, which is basically it's a measurement that kind of combines. So in this task, basically you get some stimuli where you have to press a button to respond to them, and other stimuli where you have to not press the button. And the D prime is kind of a measurement that incorporates both like the number of errors that you made where you didn't press the button when you should have, and the number of errors where you pressed the button that you shouldn't have. And so basically a higher D prime just means you're better at following the instructions.
Yeah, more accurate perception of what
Exactly.
the sounds.
You're just, so the higher the D prime, the better you're doing it overall.
Okay.
And I think what's interesting here is that, so in this low ASRS, so they also split it up based on like, so this is at the start of this attention task and at the end of the attention task. And so people who have more attentional problems, one of the things you see is that their performance falls off more over time, especially if you look at this gray bar, which is with no modulation. And the people who have fewer problems fall off less. But what's really interesting here is that if they did certain types of modulation, especially this like 16 hertz one, you kind of boosted their performance in the high ASRS group, and also you attenuated this tendency for it to fall off. So they interpret this as like, this is improving their attention performance, and it's also helping them maintain it over time.
Ooh, specifically at the 16 hertz level.
Yeah, so it looks like this 16 hertz medium depth had the biggest effect. And interestingly, so it seems like also this 32 hertz medium depth is helping initially, but then it kind of converges like back towards the no stimulation in the late. So it's like it's like both of those give an initial boost, but only this one is sustained.
Interesting.
And you can actually see, let's see. So then on the second one, the second experiment where they were just changing the modulation depth, again, so it looks like the 16 hertz in this experiment, when they gave 16 hertz, they actually got better over time, versus the no stimulation, they pretty much stayed constant. And so these are like not huge effects, but they're significant. And I think it's quite interesting. And I think it kind of gets into this. So this is also a type of research that actually I've worked on, not with in the context of music, but actually with wearable devices that can give people rhythmic stimulation. And I think that one of the things that we found in that study, or I guess one of the hypotheses we have in that study, is that this rhythmic stimulation seems to kind of increase brain excitability. And I think that has a benefit for people's attention performance.
Yeah. Would this be like an alpha band oscillation?
So 16 hertz would be like beta band.
Beta band?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so interestingly, one of the things that beta band is thought to be involved in is response inhibition, actually. So that could explain why they're getting the better performance is because
They're
so
better at the
usually
no-go
when
part.
people's performance declines on this task, what is actually happening is that they're responding, their attention wanders and they respond on the trials when they're not supposed to respond. And so
Got it.
if you're boosting people's inhibition, that could help.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see that.
Yeah, but I'm not convinced that that is what is going on here, because I actually think what could be going on, like, so when I was looking at the if we go back to this this map, so this is the amplitude modulation compared to the other two conditions. What
Yep.
we see is that we kind of have this really broad increase in brain activity, especially in sensory processing regions. And so what I think might be going on here is that this amplitude modulated music is just kind of increasing the sort of gain for incoming sensory information, and therefore it's easier to make perceptual judgments.
No. So also the other thing is the rate, the modulation rate versus the modulation depth. They seem to have opposing roles. Like whereas like okay, so in the high ASRS groups, the higher modulation rate, right? Sorry, when they modulated the rate, their performance got shittier. But if they modulated the depth, their performance got better.
Yeah,
Like
so,
the difference
so
between
in the high ASRS,
yeah.
so it looks like
It got
so
worse
in this
with time, right?
modulation rate experiment, so we've got 16 hertz medium depth, 32 hertz medium depth, and so I'm not sure what this. It's hard. Oh yeah, so it's 8 hertz. So that this one is 8 hertz, 16 hertz, and then 32 hertz, and then these ones are all at 16 hertz. So I think they did this experiment first, and what they found is that just like in these high ASRS people, stimulating at 16 hertz seemed to have the biggest effect. And then they were like, okay, let's like go just at 16 hertz, and then we're going to change the modulation depth, which is basically just how intense like the
Low,
size
medium,
of
high,
this
yeah.
modulation.
Got it.
And so then they were like, okay, let's change the modulation depth. And they found that for these people who have more attention problems, the high depth has the biggest effect.
Got it. That makes sense.
Which kind of makes sense. So that one's so it's, I think like when I'm thinking about this, so it turns out there's kind of the brain has a lot of filtering properties. So it turns out that there are different frequencies of auditory stimuli that actually kind of generate the most, like some frequencies are better at others than at actually kind of entraining activity in the brain. And it seems to be related to just the brain does a lot of intrinsic filtering. And so that probably explains why there's this effective modulation rate. And then the modulation depth seems to be like the highest depth has the biggest effect in these people.
Within the 16 hertz. Like that's already within the Oh, okay. Interesting.
So these ones, it's kind of a confusing figure, but so in this experiment for a modulation depth, these are all the 16 hertz conditions and then no modulation.
Got it. Should we be making a playlist of music that plays at approximately 16 hertz?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? With like a downbeat at that speed. Like what is that speed? Like do you know what I mean?
So
16
it
hertz
would be
music. Yeah, I just like looked up a bunch of songs and like a bunch of things came. Oh,
how
hey.
many BPM would that be?
Yeah.
I guess 16 BPM or no, because it's 16. No, it's 16 per second. So 960
beats per minute. So would it improve?
I don't think that's really a thing, right?
No, okay, you know what? It's actually a thing because when I googled 16 hertz music, the first thing that showed up on YouTube was study at home office music. So clearly someone is doing this already.
Yeah,
um
so I think like people are doing it. Oh yeah, revised views, like that's a lot of beats. Yeah. Like they have like, ah yeah, let me get my 960 hertz workout or my 960 BPM workout music.
yeah.
But
Wait, I'm just gonna
yeah,
like quickly
listen
listen
to
to
it.
some to see if it's like if it feels fast. Because sometimes, fast is relative depending on like if your heart rate is going. So like I know this because I don't know if you played instruments before, but during the performance day, you're always rushed because your heart rate is going faster and you you go faster because
So
you're no, like
people
I
start
play
playing
faster
faster.
because like I just perceive the world faster. Everything is slowed down, right? Like the world, like okay,
So
I'm
what does it
listening.
sound like?
It's really slow.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I'm listening to this. Oh, okay. So they actually played a 16 hertz binaural beta wave on top of the music that you
Yeah.
don't perceive like directly. Does it
I was
work if
gonna
you
say
don't perceive it?
that's probably how they do it. Like so it's similar to what they were doing in this paper. Um,
Ah, okay.
and actually, so this lab, they actually worked with a company called Brain.fm, which also tries to do that. So their whole thing is basically they engineer ways to modulate sounds like that to modulate different brain functions.
Ah,
Yeah.
fascinating. Okay, I feel like we're like just late to this game. Like Spotify full on has a 16 hertz release oxygen to the cell playlist.
Yeah, I think the thing is like it's been like there's all this stuff where it's like like you can get like 16 hertz music and like 40 hertz music, which people make that because they think it'll like cure Alzheimer's or whatever. But it's like the actual science right now on it is just getting started.
Yeah, okay,
Like
that's fair.
it's like they're like, okay, it releases oxygen to the cell, and you're like, okay,
Does
fine.
it? What is the mechanism? Show me.
Yeah,
But
like
it doesn't hurt to have this playlist on
right.
your Spotify, I suppose. Um, cool. Fascinating. Okay, I
Yeah.
thought I would end with a cool story that I didn't read that deeply in. Um, but like it actually made like was the reason we picked music this week. 3 days ago, like or like this Monday, Science dropped this article about how chimps in Western and Eastern Africa had different rhythm songs. They played rhythm differently. So I forget if it's Western or Eastern, but one of them played with rocks. They usually would keep rocks in a pile and they'd throw rocks at the same tree with the rock pile and like do like repetitive hooting and panting in combination with the rock throwing. And the other ones would hit specific beats onto tree trunks. And it was specific to the Western population of chimps versus the Eastern population chimps. So like
Ah.
previous to this, we had known that chimps in captivity could like exhibit rhythmic drumming,
Hmm.
but it was actually the first time and the largest sampling of wild chimps in their natural habitats communicating and using these as like using these like musical drumming to communicate with other chimps.
Hmm.
And it's like it's kind of culture.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, do you think it's culturally transmitted or?
I mean, yeah, it's specific to the social communicating, like socially over. So like the Western chimps were in like more savanna like environments with like less trees, and so they didn't do the tree
Mhm.
thing. And then the Eastern ones were in more rainforest type spaces where they did have trees, and so they would use the rocks and the trees to communicate. And it
Makes
was like,
sense, yeah.
yeah, and they had like hidden cameras, and they were like, I mean, these are like 25 years plus of like recording chimp noises basically, and they finally like collated it all together into like two studies, and it's kind of cool. I was just sat there and I was
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
wow, this is like rhythmic drumming, that's like kept within, like that's like I guess like passed amongst each other, like amongst the chimps of the western part and the eastern part. Chimps are like they have a shared music language, or they have a shared
And
rhythmic language. Like
and
they
so
were like the
what
it
do
was like,
they think? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
oh, I was gonna say like one of the rhythmic tree drumming was like done on the second and fourth beat. So it's like on the, it's like one and two and like they're on the ands.
Hmm.
They're hitting it on the, there's a specific beat they like to drum with.
Hmm.
Um yeah, and they use it to communicate like long distances. And I was like, that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
instead of shouting, and
What are they communicating?
I don't think we know that yet.
We know. Yeah.
I don't think we've
But it's
reached the
like,
point where we understand why they're communicating and what they're communicating. It's just that they definitely are communicating. But I was sitting there and I was like, humans communicate with drumming too, right? Like if you
mhm,
imagine us in like military times, like forward march is a specific drumming rhythm. You hear it,
uh-huh,
and then you like, I think one drummer hears it, the next drummer plays the same thing, and then like they can like telephone it, and then your whole, suddenly your whole army is up and marching, right? um
uh-huh.
it could be something like that. Oh no.
Chimp war.
Chip war. I
That would
know.
be really interesting if the chimps like use it to like communicate, like coordinate aggression.
That would be really cool. I mean, we do know they coordinate aggression. Like they hunt
Yeah.
together, right, in packs.
Uh-huh.
Um, and usually it's, I was gonna say it's probably a stealth activity. And I wonder if the drumming doesn't sound like a chimp. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Like you
the,
can make it sound like something else. So yeah.
yeah, it's like their way of communicating with each other without like letting the prey know that they're coming.
Uh-huh.
Tactical
Yeah.
trip. Yep.
Tactical.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder.
I mean, I think that's super interesting, like this fact that like they use rhythm and like humans use rhythmic drumming to communicate. And like actually like even going beyond that, you even see that like in all our telecommunication stuff. So the like we don't drum as much to communicate anymore, but when you're using most wireless communications technologies, it's actually doing something quite similar to that. Like it's
You mean like Morse code?
modulating a signal at a rhythm. And it's like from an information theory perspective, it's actually really interesting because it like the reason that we do that and all these other animals do it apparently is it's a really efficient way to get information without errors kind of at the minimal power. And the reason is for similar to what we said before, it's like there aren't that many sources of noise that actually have this kind of repeating pattern at an arbitrary frequency consistently. So if you
Huh.
can generate something like that, you can get a very good signal to noise ratio, and it's very good for communicating.
Oh, that's, what if they're communicating like chimp Morse code?
Yep. Uh-huh. I mean, they could be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like if you look into the papers, there's like a lot more about like their behavior, like as groups.
Mhm.
Like the eastern chimps are more likely to be like to be live in really big groups where they fight a lot, and like the western groups are a little bit more egalitarian and live in smaller little groups, and like they think that that's where the drumming differences come from,
Hmm.
but
Mhm.
it is kind
And
of
also the
cool.
environment.
Yeah, yeah, like the environment, like the trees, the lack of trees, like how many other chimps are around, how competitive it is, like resources are, and like if they're fighting all the time. Like it's kind of fascinating. It was just nice. Like it's been a while since I like saw a big chimp paper. And this was like a bunch of chimp papers.
Mhm.
All came out this week, which is kind of cool.
I really
Um,
want to know like what kind of information are they communicating? Because like to me that seems like important to also say like, okay, is this communication or is this just some? I mean, I like a lot of animals broadcast signals that are like, I guess technically communication, but they're really more like a mating call or a territorial call or something. Like,
yeah, it could also just be like, "This is my space, get out." They
yeah.
do tend to play. They drum
Mhm.
similarly, like the
Mhm.
same Like maybe that's just like their signature. It's just like you are now in my territory. I'm making the beats that are my like if you can
Uh-huh.
hear me, you're like you're in my space now. It could just be
Yeah.
like it could be that. It could be territorial. Like I don't know. I think they're gonna do more like interesting analysis of it. Um
Oh yeah. So we can maliciously start a war between the chimps. Yes, yeah. So once we understand this, we can like manipulate the chimps to do our bidding.
yeah. I think the article was really trying to emphasize how we would not be able to see and observe these kind of changes if we didn't um keep the environment nice so that there's enough diversity for the chimps to live in
Ah,
so
uh-huh.
that they could actually create different kinds of chimp cultures. Should we and like conservation is good, please keep doing that. It's kind of the vibe the paper is going for. Maybe not a let's start a chimp wars.
Like we can't like not like let's use this to what like defeat the chimpanzees, Swenson. Hurrah.
Yeah. Yeah, let's like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. And I think drumming is very intuitive. Like I could
Uh-huh.
imagine, sometimes I'm like, are we overthinking it? Like maybe they just like the vibes of some drumming. Like humans just enjoy some drumming sometimes. Like
Yeah.
we'll sit there
I
and
was
like
gonna
tap
that
out a
actually
rhythm.
gets into one of the other papers that I found, which I was really looking in. So another question I had is kind of like I was thinking about the neuromodulatory rules of music, and so this rhythm thing was one thing. It's like, okay, maybe music helps us pay attention because it has these rhythms um, that can modulate our brain activity. But I was also wondering, like, why do people enjoy music? Um, and the so one of the things that I found actually was this paper. It was in PNAS just a few years ago, and it's called Musical Reward Prediction Errors Engage the Nucleus Accumbens and Motivate Learning. So the the basics of this is that so we've known for quite a while that when people are listening to music, the nucleus accumbens, so kind of a big part of the dopamine system in the
Yeah.
brain, really lights up. Which is kind of interesting because like when you're listening to music, like I mean you're not really getting rewards and you're not really doing anything. So people were like, why is this activating this system? And what this paper suggests is that actually um, when people are listening to music, music has repeated structure in it, but then it also has like unpredictable changes. And so one of the theories that they had is that when the brain is kind of constantly just trying to predict what happens next in the music, and um and then when there's these somewhat but not completely predictable shifts, that kind of causes a burst of dopamine from the systems that are involved in learning, and that makes us feel kind of motivated and good. And so the evidence they found for this is that they found that these changes in the music seemed to elicit bursts of dopamine firing that are similar to like what you see when an animal gets an unexpected reward.
I wonder how long it lasts. Because I feel like
Mhm.
this is like a you can understand like a hit of dopamine when you like that, but I wonder
Uh-huh.
if you could just continuously play the same song. Do you know what I mean? Like if you kept playing the
Yeah.
music, like would you eventually habituate and like the neuromodulation would cease as you
Yeah.
like listen to the song over and over again, or will you become more sensitized to it and you need less of the song to get like you just need like suggestion of the song, and then you're like in Baby Shark territory where you're just like, I'm having fun now. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah.
Like you can
Yeah.
be in like a little bit and like just give you a little earworm, and then like suddenly like it just keeps going. Eh,
Mhm. Yeah. I mean,
The chills, yeah.
I'd
Like when you get
guess.
the first like
Yeah.
eargasm, you're like, oh my gosh, that sounded amazing. Wow. But like, can you listen to it again? No, but then you do listen to it again and again, and you're like, does the wow and that neuromodulation decrease over
I
time?
guess it does, because then you should have eventually you should have no prediction error, right? Like if you know exactly how the song goes.
That's true. And then it just becomes learned. It's kind of like
Uh-huh.
the reward prediction error, like it goes from the stimulus and it travels back to the
Yeah.
sorry, like it used to goes from the reward and it travels back to the conditioned stimulus. Like you'll
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. It's like because the reward prediction errors are happening when something in this music happens that you didn't expect. And then the function of that burst of dopamine is that it actually helps you learn how that song goes. It helps you correct your expectations about what's
no.
going to happen next. But I think that actually they I mean, I think that matches to kind of the subjective experience that people have is that like if a particular song just gets played a lot, people do kind of start finding it less pleasant.
Yeah, I was gonna say it also definitely gets ingrained. Like there's I was reading Musicphilia a couple years ago. Like this is that Oliver Sacks book. And he talks about
Hmm.
patients who are like in the depths of like Parkinson's. They'll have like severe like they could like barely move. And like you
Uh-huh.
can play music to them and like if this music is a meaningful piece of song, like you can clearly show like you can like play ballet music to a ballet to like a ballet dancer
Hmm.
and they will start moving again to those
Huh.
movements to like
Uh-huh.
it is like so there are parts of it that are like privileged, which is so
Hmm.
cool. Like there are parts like just like certain circuits that are related to song and memory and like how we process music that just
Hmm.
remains even
Yeah.
even like in the depths of a disease that literally robs you of movement.
Yeah.
Like these people can like move again just to the music. It's
Hmm.
pretty more remarkable.
I think there's some cases of people who had a stroke and lost their ability to speak, but they could still sing. So they could communicate by singing,
Singing.
but not by speaking. Um,
Oh, that's rough. So their life is
yeah.
just a musical.
It's just like your life. It's like, okay, I guess we're into the musical episode of my life.
Yeah, it's just like the musical era where they
Yeah.
do libretto for everything. This,
Yeah.
the sing talking.
Right. Uh-huh.
Oh,
But I
that's
guess
great.
it's like, I guess it's better than not being able to communicate at all.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Oh, that's
Ribeye
wild.
B said like, oh, it's like the chills that people get listening to the music they like. And yeah, I think actually, so there's some theories that are actually link um, chills to prediction error too. So there's some psychological theories that actually um, basically say that chills are a consequence of extremely high prediction errors in certain domains. So it could be
Hmm. I don't know if apparently there's a word for it. It's called frisson.
frisson. Uh-huh.
Frisson. Okay, I don't know if I experienced frisson like a
Have you experienced
full.
ASMR?
It's just like when people like
It's
eat food
basically the same
quietly.
thing. Uh-huh.
I don't
It's
know
like
if
this kind of like so people experience it usually as kind of like a sort of tingling or chill sensation like in their back.
it's spelled I Frisson.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, okay, actually no, I think I have because of musical theater.
So it was when you were listening to music.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I can see it.
Um, yeah,
Frisson.
I think, yep.
Huh.
Um, yeah, interestingly, it happens often when people are watching, listening to music, and oftentimes when they're watching just very emotional scenes are like the two biggest triggers for it.
I was gonna say I
Uh,
think it needs to be paired with for me, I think it needs to be paired with a story.
mhm.
Like just hearing it on its own, even the most like phenomenal music, it's not the same as if it is in the context of a story. And I feel like actually I think most of us will remember the first time they have experienced Free Zone.
Uh-huh.
Um
Yeah.
because it's probably quite vivid. Do you remember what yours was? I think this is a good place to end, by the way. Like you
Yeah.
can share what do you remember what was yours?
Um, I don't remember.
Oh, you don't? Okay,
No.
I think I remember mine, and I think is watching The Lion King, and it's the scene where Mufasa dies, and you hear like Hans Zimmer's soundtrack in the back,
Oh wow.
and
Yeah.
it's like you get the feeling, right? You understand the gravity of what happened.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, oh my gosh, it's sad. Also, I was a child, and it was like, it was a big deal. It was a death scene. Like the music was like sweeping. You felt the energy from like the stampede. You felt all of it. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, so
yeah.
this is like that's like one of the theory, like this theory that I was mentioning, is that kind of like it says that chills are related to kind of like when something happens and it dramatically shifts kind of your interpretation of a scene in a highly salient way. That's kind of one of these theories about like what is happening when you're getting these chills. So that kind of tracks with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I
Um,
was actually going to say, so one of the people who used to be in our lab actually worked on this project called Chills DB, where they actually had people listen to all these different kinds of music and watch different movies, and they actually mapped out the scenes and songs that are most likely to elicit these responses.
that's cool. I'm trying to open this paper that you just dropped.
Or actually, it looks like it has a website too, although it looks like it's in French. But
Chills, a gold standard for aesthetic chill stimuli. No, this is so cool. I mean, I guess this is like, here is like a goal for y'all artists out there. Like, make us more art like this
uh-huh.
that can induce chills. And surprisingly, I guess this is a really good place to end. Artists are really good at finding like illusions and like just ways to manipulate our brain, like
Hmm.
even faster than scientists, like usually almost all the time faster than scientists are at finding this kind of phenomenon. Like a lot
Right.
of like
Yeah.
auditory
Yep.
illusions, visual illusions, like things like that, artists found it first, and then like
Yeah.
we
And
were
then
just
like
like,
we
oh,
studied them.
yeah, afterwards. So cool. Keep making us cool shit so we can study it
Hmm.
and enjoy it too as a population. Anyway, thank you for
Anyway,
joining
yeah,
us.
that's a good place to end.
Thank you for joining us. We're Philosophy
Great.
Sciencing. Until next time.
Great. Bye.
Bye.